coming to this, what I believe will be the final session. We had some discussion last time about it. We had programmed 2 chapters for last time, chapter 5 and 6 in the book. And then it was to be chapter 7 today. But we didn't get very far into chapter 6, which is bearing witness. And so the thought was we would just try to, do a quick run through of what's in chapter, or just the basic idea behind chapter 6, and then spend a lot of time on chapter 7. So let's see how it goes. And I'm not attached to outcomes. The rest of you aren't, about where we get and where we go from here. So, Baron, both like and am a little challenged about by this book. We've taught this course in different ways. One way was to say, week 1 is going to be early Quaker history. Week 2 is going to be, what's the inner light. Week 3 is going to be about worship. Week 4 is going to be about business meeting. And this is more, if you look at the titles of the chapters, they all kind of run together. You can kind of say the same things about each one. That's kind of getting what I was wishing, what I always wished for, because I always said, well, you should be able to walk into any one of these sessions and just stand alone, without having gone to another one or going to another one after this, be able to get more or less everything that's being done with a focus on one thing, and so that's kind of, I think, what this book is. It's no matter where you dip in the book, that's what I like about it. No matter where you dip in this book, you're going to get more or less, a sense of Quaker experience and Quaker life, just with a different focus. And so each chapter could stand on its own. But especially chapter 6 and chapter 7, if you think about bearing witness and changing things, where does one stop and the other one start up? It's kind of, to my mind, it's kind of a continuum. I'm going to be quiet for a minute and just let people speak to whatever they want to speak to, and then we'll go on.
More than 30 years ago, a friend told me that her shorthand definition for Quakers was go cheerfully through the world, answering that of God and everyone. And I've kind of adopted that, which is, of course, in this quotation.
Referring to the quotation on page 109 in your book, and that's up on the screen here, the part of the screen that's above where it says the testimonies. Now, at least I'm going to put the people down at the bottom here, so those online can also read the full text.
That won't change it on their screen.
Oh, that won't?
No.
Oh, well, that's right. Yeah. So if you're right. What am I thinking? If people can, we're online, you can read it so you can see that quote at the top. Would anyone, either here or online, like to just read that quote before the part that says the testimonies, I see, yeah.
Be patterns, be examples in all countries, places, islands, nations, wherever you come, that your carriage in life may preach among all sorts of people and to them. Then you will come to walk cheerfully over the world, answering that of God in everyone, whereby them ye may be a blessing and make the witness of God in them to bless you.
Thank you.
The last sentence is a bit interesting. I'm trying to parse it. Whereby in them ye be a blessing, and make the witness of God in them to bless you. I guess it's the sort of like evangelizing of like you bring the spirit or worship or practice to someone so that they can then like reciprocate it to you. Is that what's kind of being discussed there?
I don't know. I mean, this is a this is almost a Quaker commonplace, this quote. You know, everyone uses it, although usually they just say, people usually remember, walk cheerfully over the world, answering that of God in everyone, and they stop right there. You know, and people don't realize what the greater context is. Mary's a big fan of this passage. Maybe Mary could.
And that's usually you have stopped right there after answering that of God and everyone. The last sentence is interesting. So it's like, you will be blessed by seeing that of God in them, and they will be blessed by meeting you. Or at least that's my modern English quickie.
Yeah. Did you say something, Bethany?
Yeah, well, yes, kind of.
Speak up, you know.
I'm a little shy, so you have to forgive me. I love that quote, but I also, I think maybe me being here today, I might have something to share about that. My first introduction to Quakerism was through, I had a landlord in Seattle. When I was a social worker, young social worker, not making very much money, and trying to figure out a way to live in that city, and ended up renting a house with a friend from somebody who charged probably half, maybe 2/3 of what rent would be in the area. And I never met the person, actually. This was somebody my roommate worked with. But the only the only way that was explained to me was, well, they're a Quaker. And it really stuck with me because I was in a period of my life when I was very socially active and trying to kind of make the world do right by people and getting frustrated by that process. And here was a person who made a huge difference in my life, allowing me to live the life I wanted to live, and it was by their example. And we never had a conversation, never talked about God or service or any of those things, but that was probably even close to 20 years ago. And it stuck with me for 20 years. And it's more of a witness than I think any other experience I've ever had, because it was practical, it was giving, and it was also a deep understanding of the values and social justice and caring for other people that I think Quakers embody. So it stuck with me, and it's probably a big reason why I'm here. And it's the only person I've ever known who was a Quaker.
It's interesting also that you're receiving that kind of blessing through them without physically meeting them as well.
A spiritual thing and a very material thing, but such a huge witness to the bigger picture of truth and reality. In an environment like Seattle, and very skyrocketing prices. People can't afford to live there that are regular people, and I wouldn't have been able to.
Sounds familiar. Now, another thing, I take that that last clause there that you brought up is it's not the usual kind of missionary or evangelical work that you think of, whereas I've got the word, I'm going to come out and give it to you who don't have it, or it's more saying, to me, saying it's more on equals. Just if you can kind of recognize that of God in yourself and be an example, you will go out and you will mutually recognize that in each other, that common precious humanity, that everyone has.
That's like, I kept reading farther. One of the Quakers went to the Indians. I guess it was around the Civil War time, and he was learning from the Indians.
I was actually going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
As a matter of fact, no, thank you. That leads right into it. Let's. I'd like to look at a place where John Woolman, and it was actually in probably the 1750s that he did this, I think. But could have happened during the time of the Civil War.
Yeah, I just read war. I didn't know which war they were talking about.
He was talking about frontier wars between settlers and natives.
Okay.
I think what he was talking about. Let's just see. I will go and say, keyword on that quote. Okay. At the very bottom, they're just mentioning what the context of that quote is going to be. Just exactly what Irene just brought up, and this kind of leads in. So we just saw that quote from George Fox, and we talked about it a little bit. And now this is what's the next stage on that? What's a practical example of that? So at the bottom it says that Woolman. And remember, Rex Ambler writing here. Rex Ambler is British, okay? So he uses some British things. And also, I feel if Rex Ambler weren't British, we'd hear John Woolman mentioned more than once in this book. Woolman was very big in the American Quaker imagination. But he was describing how he had his concern for going and visiting with the natives. On the frontier of Pennsylvania. So this is also a very, very famous, it has at least 2 or 3 famous lines in it. Quakers remember a lot.
117.
Thank you. 117 in the actual print book. Would someone like to read that? And I will flip to the next page because it's a slightly longer quote. If anyone wants to just start reading that.
Where are we starting?
117, and there's a quote from Woolman there. 117, right? Right.
Okay, underneath American Indians?
Yeah, and then when he says starting love was the first motion.
Love was the first motion, and then a concern arose to spend some time with the Indians that I might feel and understand their life and the spirit they live in. If haply I might receive some instruction from them, or they be in any degree helped forward by my following the leadings of truth amongst them, and as it pleased the Lord to make way for my going at a time when the troubles of war were increasing, and when by reason of much wet weather traveling was more difficult than usual at that season, I looked upon it as a more favorable opportunity to season my mind and bring me into a nearer sympathy with them. And as mine eyes was to the great Father of mercies, Humbly desiring to learn what his will was concerning we, I was made quiet and content.
Thank you.
All would think about that all the time.
There you go. I'm struck by a similar to that Fox quote, where it seems more reciprocal than we think of someone who's going out, to sort of spread the word. It's more, no, let's go and see that of God in them, and they'll see that of God in us, because he says, if haply I might receive some instruction from them, okay, or they be in any degree helped forward by my following the leadings of truth amongst them. This is from Woolman's journal. And so he goes on, after this passage, he goes on to describe his trip. At some point, there's also a fairly famous passage. There's also a fairly famous passage where he says, he's among people, and they do have an interpreter, but he's so moved that he speaks. Of course, he doesn't know their language, so he speaks in English. At one point, one of the leaders of the group that he's gone to visit comes up, touches a woman's chest, and says he wants to feel where the words come from. That's also in this passage. As you know, he didn't prevent any conflict there. In fact, the Quakers in the colony of Pennsylvania had a majority, or at least a plurality in the assembly, in the legislature, and they lost that plurality, in the next elections over the issue of war with the native tribes. Just so you know, so that kind of this kind of marks the time when the Quakers became no longer had political power as a body. So he's talking about his witness, his bearing witness, and this is a nice kind of transition into the idea of activism, changing things. How do you do this?
The one sentence in there, to change the world for the better, you have to destroy the enemy. And I was thinking, how do you define enemy? An enemy is not a person. For me, enemy is not a person. It's an invisible entity that someone accepts. But how do you destroy that? Is it by Quaker love, or?
I think you might be saying the opposite thing of that you don't need to destroy the enemy. I'm not sure where you're quoting from exactly, but
Characterizing what other people think.
yeah, so.
Yes. If you read this part here.
Where is that, by the way?
It's on page 118.
Oh, just follow.
Underneath the quote, and then the sentence goes, they're talking about enemies. So I'm thinking different people have different definitions of enemy. Mm-hmm. Do people think it's actual person, or to me, enemy is just an invisible thing that's somebody accepts for themselves, they make themselves an enemy.
I think when he's mentioning enemy, he's saying that if you are angry, so like the desire to create an enemy comes from a place of anger, and you shouldn't have that anger in the first place. Because then he goes on to talk about if you're coming from a place of pride and the pitfalls of that.
Of course, as a human animal, I'm going to have anger, right? And I'm going to have other, emotions and feelings. I guess that's what I do with those things. That's how I've been overmastered by my anger sometimes.
The paragraph is just saying, be aware of your feelings, but don't let them take over.
I like that.
Because it's saying, you can be prideful or you can feel hopeless. Don't dwell in either one of them. So I think it's just saying, be aware of what you feel and don't let either side win.
You were going to say something.
Yeah, and if you pair that with the quote before that, like, that change is relational, that change is love-based and people-based, that, we're not fighting necessarily people or a system, we're creating a relationship of love that is helping people, right? And that's changing the system.
What does the Quaker do when that doesn't work for the situation? Like,
Every day.
all the time.
I think we have to let go of what we can't control and focus on what is in our control, right? Relating to other people.
My mother always said, kill them with kindness. If you find yourself in a negative situation with somebody, like I did in high school, this girl, she said, give them a compliment. If you're uncomfortable, make light, give them a compliment. It worked for me. Now, my brother, I don't know about his stories, but he's like Daddy. But he said, no, I got beat up. And I thought, I never did that, no. But, one girl in high school scared me. She rode my bus. She picked on me. And I'm easy to be picked on. Therefore, it happened often because I'm passive. I don't retaliate. I'm non-threatening. And I was easy prey. So I would compliment. And one time when I worked in a clinic, this one girl came in, she looked mean and bad, and so I complimented her. Oh, you should have seen it before I got the blood out. I was like, oh, okay. But we were good. So, and Mother said, well, if somebody's going to treat you badly, you just talk them out of it. Okay, that doesn't always work, especially when they're on drugs or have a weapon or something. But fortunately, for the most part, our family escaped that. And I think the enemy is the negativity that people either own or other people portray or act out in. And that if you don't retaliate in like, you're better for it. But no matter how you feel, like when I gave 2 talks at the library about banned books, I felt like I wanted to go punch those people, but I didn't because I just gave my speech because that's what you do. You don't hurt people. So I think if the evil is the negative actions or behavior from others, if we react kindly in different ways, hopefully it will lessen that negativity. Not always.
I had a similar situation in high school. I rarely talked. I was very shy, and it was driver's ed. I was driving in the car, my instructor next to me, and 3 people in the back seat. And one of the girls, referring to me, said, "Still waters run deep and dirty." And I didn't say anything. I was kind of hurt when she said it. But the teacher jumped on her,
I don't even understand.
And I went to, the only class reunion I went to was my 50-year class reunion, and they had me sitting next to her.
See, and after
And you remember it.
and this one girl I was scared of, turns out she married into one of my best friend's families. Oh, let's go to my uncle's house. They're having a party. By the way, he married her. And I go, oh, no, 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 no. But it was fine because by then she had a toddler and I'm not a party person. No smoking and drinking, and I'm in there reading a story to the kid. So when she came in, she saw me, she was good because she grew up, and the mean girls, when you see them later on, 20 years later, 30 years later, they're not still cliquish, but some are not so mean. And I'm thinking, if I ever did anything to anybody, I want to apologize. I just don't know if it's not like me to do that. But if I ever did make somebody feel bad, peer pressure, whatever, then I would like the chance to apologize, but that's my nature. It may not be theirs, and some never grow out of it. And don't understand how they affect people. And not excluding adults to the students.
I assumed it was like an apology by putting her next to me for
Maybe. It was to punish her.
On an international level, right now this doesn't seem to work.
Yeah. That's why we have to vote.
I mean, when you are deeply hurt, one response is to attack. When you think about Quakers in the Middle East, well, there's the Ramallah School for Girls that's been there for many years. There's the young woman who got killed by the Israeli bulldozer. But here and now, I think probably the only thing we can do is provide people a place to talk. And one of the places we do that is that there's a Quaker office near the UN that's sort of very neutral ground for people to come and have a
Pepper
conversation.
actually mentions that in the book. Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say what you do when this has gotten to not only life-threatening but life-destroying.
Well, on my board for years, I had ignorance leads to fear, which leads to hate. That's common. I mean, we hate what we are afraid of, and we're afraid of things we don't understand. So the more, just like the language Esperanto was invented to keep people from attacking each other, it quite didn't work. But the more we have in common, the less we are apt to conflict with those people. So, like, if we had a new student, I would say, what are you interested in? And who else is interested in that? Something like that. If you have a commonality, you are less likely to be at odds with each other. So that's one thing. But, well, I know religion has not played a good part in all of the wars, but, and I grew up, fortunately, this way, as opposed to military. So I look at Mother, with her history, I look at life differently than so many other people.
And as far as I'm aware, you're the only one of us who grew up in a Quaker household.
Yeah.
Amber talks about the Quaker United Nations office and how they work behind the scenes, just seeing if they can get people together. That's all they
Where
try
is
to
it
do.
located? In
New York, I mean, I don't know exactly where, but is their acronym Quaker United Nations office. And it reminds me of another Quaker organization, FCNL, the Friends Committee on National Legislation. And because and people, there are a number of people here who are very involved with that, and they simply bring Quakers to go and other people to go and lobby, mostly national legislators, but sometimes on the state level, and it's sort of a bearing witness, you know. And here, once again, this connection between the bearing witness and the activism. What they'll do, FCNL will not refuse to see somebody just based on what their record is or what their party is, or, you know, and of course, usually when you go in to speak, you know, to lobby a senator or representative, you're talking with their staff. You're not talking with the person. Sometimes you're talking with the person directly. And so all FCNL does, both with the volunteers who go to Washington and with their staff, is they just go in, see what's happening, you know, talk to the staff, present information to the staff, to the point where now FCNL has become a trusted source because they know that they're reliable, a trusted source of information. So if, for instance, someone in Ted Cruz's office wants to know some details about a certain situation, they'll often call up FCNL, okay, and get that information from them. And I was told some various examples, but one example is that they were talking about immigration, you know, and they were in the office of some congressperson or senator who is not very good on that issue. Like there are many people that are good on that issue, but they were in someone's office and they were talking to the staff member, just presenting things about how hard it is to stay in this country, you know, especially if you're a member of a not well looked at group. And suddenly the staff member got very emotional and said, well, you know, my partner is Iranian. And I'm very fearful about whether he can stay in this country, you know. And that was, I forget whose office it was, but it was someone whose name you recognize. And said, oh, this is not a, but there are these little drip kind of inroads being made, and sometimes things do happen. Again, maybe we're not so attached to outcomes. I'm going to do another John Woolman quote, and this is not in the book, and it's hard to see on the screen because of all the ads and stuff. Say no thanks for trying the new Google book, see if that gives me more. It gives me a little more screen, and maybe I can enlarge the size. Okay, I can do that, and then if I could pull. If you could pull the folks down, that would help. So, John, what Woolman? The context here. This is again from Woolman's journal. Yeah, thanks so much, Ed. Wow, brilliant. Okay, I can even make it a little bigger. But the context is Woolman, as we know, was worked a lot with. See if I can get this thing over to the right a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Was laboring with his leadings about slavery and about holding slaves. And earlier in his journal, he describes when he first realized this had to be a leading. He worked as a scrivener before the age of copy machines. You know, when there were documents, you had to have a professional who knew how to copy them out rapidly and accurately. You know, so you could have multiple copies, like say of a contract or something. And so he worked, one of his jobs, he worked as a scrivener. And he said he was asked to copy or create and copy an instrument for the transfer of human property. You know, and I was transferring a slave from one person to another. And he said he was asked to do it. And the first time he did it, he felt kind of weird, you know, doing it. And then he was asked a second time at another occasion to do it, and he said, "No, I can't do this. I'm not going to do it. And so then that made him, that was just a feeling he had, so then he decided to explore why he felt that way. And this led to a lifelong call to witness and bear testimony. And one of his other testimonies, not just unique to him, this was Quakers are starting to do this in the UK too, which was to boycott products that were known to be created by slave labor. This would include sugar. Okay, was raised on plantations. Also, most dyes were created in these labor-intensive processes that were basically had slaves at the initial part of the process. I'll read this because I think it's kind of hard to read on the screen. He says, well, that singularity was only for his sake. And by singularity, he means, though I was thus settled in my mind in relation to hurtful dyes, dyes, spells it funny. I felt easy to wear my garments heretofore made, and so continued. In other words, I already had dyed clothes. I'm going to wear them, until I wear out. Then I thought of getting a hat, the natural color of the fur. So remember, you see all these old pictures of Quakers and others with these old hats on, and they're usually black, okay? But they had to be dyed to be black because, of course, they were made out of animal skins. I thought of getting a hat, a natural color of the fur, but the apprehension of being looked upon as one affecting singularity. In other words, they were just going to look at me as some weirdo and somebody who just wanted to, show off or something. Felt uneasy to me, and here I had occasion to consider that things, though small in themselves, what's the big deal about wearing a hat? Though small in themselves, being clearly enjoined by divine authority as a duty, became great things to us. In other words, I had this leading to do it. I needed to do it. And I trusted that the Lord would support me in the trials that might attend the singularity, in other words, being noticeable. While that singularity was only for his sake on this account, I was under close exercise of mind in the time of our general spring meeting, 1762, greatly desiring to be rightly directed, and at a time when one of my dear brethren was concerned in humble supplication, I, being then deeply bowed in spirit before the Lord, was made willing, in case I got safe home, to speak for a hat of a natural color of the fur. And I did so. In attending public meetings, this singularity was a trial upon me, and more especially at this time as being in use amongst some who were fond of following the changeable modes of dress. And in one of the versions of his thing, he says, because that year the fashion was white hats. And of course, a fur-colored hat wouldn't do. As some of the friends who knew not on what motive I wore it carried shy of me. In other words, they kind of, okay. I felt my way for a time shut up in the ministry. He couldn't speak in meeting, and in this condition, my mind being turned toward my Heavenly Father, with fervent cries that it might be preserved to walk before Him in the meekness of wisdom, my heart was often tender in meetings, and I felt an inward consolation, which to me was very precious under these difficulties. People would talk to him. So he just waited for people to talk to him. He didn't, come out and, proclaim things and stuff. He just waited for people to talk to him. And they talked to him. And I think it's important, when people point out this, they very often remark, it wasn't that he was what we would call today making a statement, for other people. This was just, I can't do this anymore. I can't wear a hat. I can't buy new clothes that are dyed. I just can't do it. If that makes me look weird, it makes me look weird. I think that was probably the attitude. Anyway, I'll shut up about this. I always.
But what he thought about, I already have it, so I'm just going to wear it.
He said, if I already have something dyed, I'm going to wear it till.
Yeah, if you already have it, it won't do any good. Yeah. It's already there. It's like, I want to boycott Nestle, but the store already bought it. and my husband does not honor my boycott. So he's already bought it, but I feel guilty using the product. But even Mother gave me an ivory jewelry, you know, and we've shared the old stuff before we understood it's ancient. Now, do I wear the pin or do I not wear the pin? It's already there, and I had it. It's like an heirloom, but I feel guilty wearing it. But that was before we knew the story. So, yeah, it's already there. It's already been purchased. Do we utilize it or do we hide it? Don't know. I haven't worn the pin in years, so you know, that's what made me think of.
Very similar.
I think transition is often so gradual. And there's a lot of thought processing done in that. Kind of like when William Penn was challenged, why are you wearing that sword? Okay, wear as long as you think you need to wear it.
Yeah.
I guess this is part of some of the bigger topics that we've been discussing on like routine decisions and coming up with courses of action is that we might come to an agreement that slavery is bad and we shouldn't have the dyes. But how we then choose to live it is this kind of, we all have like individual ways of interpreting that. And that's kind of the Quaker way, I guess, is that we're not saying, okay, everyone get rid of all your dyed clothes and we're going to completely go dyeless. It's women decided, I'm going to wear a funny hat and keep my dyed clothes until I have no more use of them, and then subtly convince other people, maybe someone else who's more of an extremist, like the guy who would break the cup.
If he tasted sugar.
Yeah, if he tasted sugar, he'd break the cup. He would get rid of his old clothes. But for women, at least they had the same truth that slavery is wrong. But women decide, well, I'll keep my old clothes until I get there. And maybe someone else might be like, I'll continue to use some dye so long as I can assure that it's ethically sourced in some way. So because there's not like a tenet, a priest saying, hey, do this in the name of God, we have to kind of come up with our own ways of how to live, I guess, and the singularity is what Woolman described it as, affected singularity.
I think it's
Affected singularity.
also kind of the Quaker philosophy of not being in excess. And you already have the article and it has utilities to it. So to toss it out and go buy new or start over is being excessive and being flashy. Whereas you have it now, use it till it has no longer utility. And then when it's time to replace it, you replace it. And then
Another friend, the Quaker astronomer, the woman from Nantucket, whose name I can't think of, wore silk because she wouldn't wear cotton, which was raised from slaves. And, you know, there probably were people who'd give her a bad time about why you're running around in silk.
There's an anecdote about Elias Hicks, who, just for those of you unfamiliar, it's a Quaker history thing, but Elias Hicks is probably, in fact, the branch of Quakers that became us. You know, this group of Quakers are sometimes called Hicksites. Okay, that's an old term. There was a split, a schism in American Quakerism around the year 1820 between Quakers who wanted to go more Orthodox Christianity. You know, let's say you got to believe in Jesus Christ and in the resurrection and all this stuff. And other Quakers who said that's not necessary. We still want to just obey the promptings of the inner light and see where everyone goes with that. And Elias Hicks was associated with that second trend, the trend that became Quakers like us. And so he died about, I don't know, 1822 or something. And the account is that on his deathbed, when he was already not verbal, he seemed very agitated. He kept clawing the sheets away from him. And then someone realized that the sheets were made of cotton. So they instead put wool sheets on him and calmed down. Because he realized, he could feel that it wasn't cotton. So that was, that was another. So this is a couple generations after John Woolman.
One thing, I should read the journals of John Woolman, and deeply, spiritual and inspiring. I worry that it misses part of the story, which is the sort of very large sort of mass boycott and lobbying and sort of pressing campaign that Quakers led against slavery. That come talk to me about my weird hat is not a great strategy for actually change a massive and very deeply settled institution. And I mean, maybe that was sort of the start of it. That was the first move he was pretty early in that, and it was more in the 19th century that the Quakers really gained steam and actually started to make moves that would actually start to abolish slavery, first in the British Empire and then in the United States. But to me, it sort of sounds like I have my $40 fair trade sheets. I am morally good. You haven't done anything. It's great. Whatever. You bought fair trade sheets. It's really just a sort of highly consumerist. It fits into this sort of highly individualized sort of consumer-oriented vision of morality that is pretty strong in our culture right now. And I think that that's the wrong lesson to get from.
Yeah, I think if you look at that in isolation, that incident. Woolman was also just going around, he would be led to go on these long journeys, and he would just visit individual Quakers. And he was very well known, so he was received. But he would purposely kind of highlight in his trips slaveholding Quakers, because there were Quakers who held slaves up until then. And he just sit with them, wouldn't lecture them or anything like that. And I think Mary pointed out last time he would put into the slave owner's hands, oh, by the way, these people were waiting on me all weekend. Here's their wages. Could you give that to them? As a way of kind of breaking that down. But yeah, now what Woolman did, and what Woolman did in the was fairly instrumental in starting. It was kind of a sea change, that happened. So by 1790, so Woolman dies in 1770. By the way, he died on a trip that he took to England to talk about his concern with British Quakers. Okay, and he got smallpox there and died. But he dies in 1770. By 1790, okay, and you can go into I checked this out once. Wish I had it here on the screen. The proceedings of the first U.S. Congress. Okay. It's the congressional record. It's been around since the beginning, right? The proceedings of the first U.S. Congress. And the very first thing in the U.S. Congress is a bunch of people from Pennsylvania. It doesn't say, but we can imagine, right? A bunch of people from Pennsylvania. Okay, we're all elected and we run things, we're this democracy now. Here's a petition about getting rid of slavery. First thing they do, the first thing. And of course, Congress being Congress, they referred it to a committee, which is made up mostly of Southern congressmen. So didn't get very far, but then every year after that, they start, petitioning Congress and things. And a lot of those that activism that James talks about, that really got started in the UK. That's why the UK first of all, they got rid of the slave trade and then slavery, much earlier than the US. There was a committee of 12 people in the UK. I think Ambler talks about that. 9 of whom were Quakers, you know, who were instrumental in this. And Quakers tried to be less visible because they knew they didn't have a great reputation. You know, people thought they were weird, and so the other 3 people that weren't Quakers were kind of the figurehead, you know, the fronts for it. And one of the things someone pointed out, I think "Bury These Chains" by Hochschild, the same guy who wrote about King Leopold's ghost in Belgian Congo. One of the things that they point out is that all of the modern campaigns for social change, all the techniques that are used were invented there. The pamphlet, the petition, the demonstration, fair trade shops. They actually had they actually had stores. This is in late 1700s in England, where you go to and buy non-slave, you know, labor products. You know, the poster, the political poster. There's that famous poster of all these people chained in a slave ship. You know, all that was invented back then. You know, so the Quakers are a big part of that, of inventing the modern idea of a political change movement. Or social change movement. Maybe politics is too much. Sorry, I got going on this.
To go back to the fair trade sheets thing, though, I do think that there is. I think that that's maybe the difference between like having it be this external thing versus this internal thing, because I actually think like ethical consumption is super radical, right? Like if you think about being a person in the 18th century United States that is like, I'm not going to use cotton. That's freaking hard. And like that is such a radical change in your life on such a like small scale space. And even this, right, to be like, okay, so I'm gonna change, like I'm not gonna wear a dyed hat, right? And that is gonna change every single interaction you have. And you're not doing it necessarily to be like, oh, and then this will foster a conversation. It's like, no, I have to be consistent within myself. And that then does, because it does become every single conversation you have because you're like not wearing the same hat anymore. And I think that there's a study that I don't have right now, but that looked at like major change movements, right? And it was like really most of the time you've got 3% of the population that is actively involved. So I think there's the question too of what are we doing like externally and what are we doing internally? And if you're part of that 3%, having that conversation about like, okay, because so much of what that is doing is then imagining what do those systems look like, right? Like, so if I'm not going to use any cotton because it's basically all being created by enslaved folks, then we have to imagine systems in which everyone is being fairly compensated. Like, what does it look like to still have sheets and to have clothes and to have all of this stuff without anyone being exploited? And that conversation, I think, was really interesting. There's obviously a lot of those conversations happening now around ethical clothing consumption. Because the climate footprint of most of our clothes and the exploitation of most of our clothes is concerning. And I think it's been interesting as inflation has gone up and like clothes stay like relatively cheap because I guess the systems are just so exploitative that people are like, yeah, no, it's fine. But I think that there is like a level of radicalism there that is, because so much of it is systemic, right? So yeah. I don't know. But it is also a thing where it's like, because it is such a radical change, right? If you're thinking about like someone going vegan or someone being like, no, all of my clothes are going to be ethically sourced, that is like both really big and really small simultaneously. So it has to be this internal thing. Like, I think when it's coming like from a pulpit where it's like, okay, we're all going to boycott blah, or we're going to do X, then it does become this performative thing because you have to be committed. Like, if you're genuinely going to be like, nah, man, it's the 18th century and I'm not using cotton, like, you have to be doing that yourself. If someone externally is doing that, then it's going to be like, okay, I've bought these sheets, and when people come over, I'll bring out my sheets, and behold my sheets, and then where are my clothes coming from? We don't ask questions. No one says anything with the top layer. Not wearing those on Sunday. Like,
and I think, you know, speaking to what you said, and also to what James was saying, I get the sense from that passage I just read from John Woolman that he wasn't doing it necessarily to convince anybody of anything. He was just doing it because he had to do it, you know. I have another quote because you reminded me of it, and I have these tabs up here, so I popped it up. This is from a work. It's not from his journal. It's from a a work he wrote, very famous as well, called A Plea for the Poor. And it sounds almost modern. You know, he was, you know, a century before Marx. You know, he's saying some things that you would find sound very, very much about what, you know, how the poor need to be empowered, and you know, and we need to get out of the way, kind of thing. I mean, that's what he's kind of saying. But this is a very famous quote from his, which I think I heard in a message last Sunday, and I don't want to read that. I think that's more legible than the other.
I will.
Sure.
May we look upon our treasure, the furniture of our houses, and our garments, and try to discover whether the seeds of war have
Nourishment.
It is nourishment. And these are possessions. That word just threw me.
So he's not suggesting that we do anything about it. He's just saying, let's look at it.
Kind of reminds me of like Gandhi quote, like be the change you want to see in the world, right? You know, like if we could eliminate, like make laws that say, you know, unethical sourcing of materials, and how would we enforce them, right? But if we can be an example of not engaging in those behaviors. And it's kind of like what they talk about in this chapter, like when you exemplify the truth, that speaks to the truth in other people. And that gives them the option of connecting with the truth versus imposing a truth or trying to create a system that, you know, replaces government, which is eventually, I think, going to be domineering and oppressive in some ways, or has to be enforced by violence, maybe. But
Well, I think it helps us see systems rather than people.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I think it helps us see systems rather than people. Like there's a pretty, I think, innate assumption to be like, I am good and they are bad because blah. But when you start looking at like, okay, so what are the implications of like objects? It's much harder to be like, this person is evil because they drink milk from a cow. Like that's just not something that people like inherently glom onto in the same way. But when you start looking at like, what are the actual implications of the objects in our lives? And it lets you see systems, and it also lets you see like your complicity in relation to other people in a way that I think is or can be powerful, even if it can also be like co-opted and obfuscated in various nefarious ways as well.
I guess that last point was what I was sort of trying to get at earlier, is the obfuscation, and that it's sort of, unfortunately, I feel like the sort of change that you're talking about, I think, is really profound and really good. Like if you genuinely change your life in a very strong way due to some principle, if you go, I am not vegan, but I highly respect people who do that and really commit to it. If you like forego any air travel, if you make some thing that really is like, I am going to shift this in a way that will disrupt my way of being in the world, in a way that will like send a message to others, I think that's a good and a strong thing, and something I haven't really done myself and maybe should. I guess, yeah, the concern is about the way in which ethical consumption becomes another genre of luxury consumption that then marks class boundaries. Like, I can afford to buy all of the fair trade things because I'm upper middle class, whereas someone who has to shop at Walmart is, you know, unable to have that sort of level of pious virtue because they can't afford to like buy from all the corporations that slap on all of the various ethical markers onto their products.
For a while, but also notice that it's 10 after 10. Do we need a break? Yeah, people are okay. Well, do we want to just take a break now and maybe say make it 5 minutes? You can set the timer on your phone.
Good to see you. There's a lot of that going on.
Let's go to the doctor. You're diuretic, probably.
Is the therapist and the nurse. And I don't always watch the study because it's really hard.
Do you elevate your feet with this shoe?
No, because I'm under the desk. It's the place to put it.
Even that much helps with a heavy grip.
Well, I mean, they're not. They're always better. But they're always moving. My feet are always moving. I have a little rest, like a few inches.
That's better than not.
Yeah, they're always moving, and I'm off the dog. We're gonna get up.
You probably should check in with you.
I just like to throw this up at least once during the session. It's a fun
Back to the bathroom.
reminder
I
that
have a question.
Wait.
Because after I leave here, I'm going to go to Cosset and check the load.
the term in English, the snake in the grass, is first used in this pamphlet in reference to Quakers.
During Sunday morning, they do.
They do. Really?
Yeah. We have enough people. Yeah.
I've never, not that apparently.
You trying to find a chair?
Kind of how things
You
change.
trying to find a chair?
Up to my grandmother's generation, like you made your own clothes.
They do confuse.
Okay.
My mother's generation was kind of like,
Okay.
started off making our own clothes, and then
Yeah.
as the 70s started coming around, it was kind of like, okay, we're starting buying
Yeah.
commercial stuff. And
My mom's generation was not transitional like that.
And-
Absolutely.
in the church, it was like, yeah, we recognize you're wearing that, but we don't appreciate you wearing like, to them it was flashy.
Oh, the commercial stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't as simple, and it wasn't
Yep.
wholesome, it was worldly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember just the kind of clash of that.
I remember being on that border between those two, coming from a culture where simplicity, just in general American culture, simplicity and homey stuff. Yeah, that's right.
But when I we used to have a woman. She meant well. And she would just drive Ken crazy. And I thought, oh dear, what's she up to? We left all the housework for her to keep her busy. But she would do things that, no, that's one day, it used to be I'd come in and then she'd come in later. So we'd visit a few minutes and I'd leave, and then she'd go to whatever. And one time I came in and she had been the day before, and we were out of pink house. So it's in the bathroom, and I saw a used napkin, paper napkin sitting in the corner, and I just picked it up and tossed it. Because I was ready. So she came in at her time and she said, "Where's that napkin?" I said, "Why are you asking?" She said, "Well, we're out of paper towels, that way we can all use that napkin." And I said, "Harriet, that's gross." And I really got, it's unsanitary. Because the clothes I said, "So the next person that comes, think about it." And she said, "But I put it," I said, "Harriet, nobody knows how clean that is." I didn't even want to touch it. I said, "But that's once a paper is used, it gets tossed. This is what we do, it's sanitary." So she wasn't happy with that, but she was like, she said, "Here's an onion sucker." But I don't really cook. And I have a jar of clothes that'll last me a year.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the conversation, but anyway, I'm sure. But she wants to grow everything, recycle everything, and she goes to such. But the thing is, I think only 10% of our stuff gets recycled.
Even if you put it in the recycle. Yeah.
I feel bad,
Yeah.
but I don't feel that guilty because it's out of my control. And I don't go into buying those expensive little pouches that you have to wash out each time you put food, like
I think, you know, I think that goes to the idea that it's about a person, it's about personal
It is.
leading, you know, what you're led to do
Because we can only do what we can do.
and what we're led to do.
Wow. And I don't understand, in Taylor they had purse bingo, and then I saw the pictures and I read the post, and you pay to get in. And people have done these new expensive purses. The most expensive one they showed off, and somebody won it. It was like $3,000. You're walking around carrying, look what I have, please steal it from me. Knock me over and steal it from me. I don't even want to pay $10 for a purse. That's why I like pockets. But that's absurd. Like, why do you have, like my friend, she doesn't have much money. And I said, how do you get Coach purses? And she said, oh, they're all gifts.
Oh, very good.
Well, because she's special. Really. But $3,000 for a bag? That's absurd.
You gotta go,
If I had $3,000, I'd take a trip.
Well, I'd be repairing something at the house.
Well, that's also possible, yes.
But, oh my gosh. But really, it's like, I don't own a diamond because I don't want to say, see what I have, cut my finger off for it. No, I don't want that stuff. If somebody broke in the house to steal, I go, there's nothing in here, you know, there's no TV in the living room. The TV I have in the office is old and it's that big. And everything in the living room has been used before by somebody. I'm practical.
Yesterday, Stuart couldn't figure out where he parked his car at the airport. And he's saying, somebody stole my truck. This truck is 15 years old. Nobody stole your truck.
Yeah.
Keep looking.
My husband thought the garage door was open and ran into it.
Hey.
And then he lied to me about it.
Well, my husband and my son accused me of running into the garage door, and it really the spring that opens the garage door broke.
Yes,
It made a loud noise.
That's happened before with us.
But they both assumed that I run into it.
Do I want to ruin the day by asking him about it, challenging him, because the evidence points to and not, if it fell, why'd you still back up? You know, it doesn't make any sense. He's lying to me.
I don't know if this is necessarily a lighter thing. I always like to throw this in some point during this class. This is a pamphlet written in 1696, I think, published by an Anglican. Well, he was a dissenting Anglican. This guy had a lot of got into conflicts with a lot of people. The Snake in the Grass is the name of the pamphlet, and this is a pamphlet about Quakers, or Satan transformed into an angel of light. His name was Charles Leslie, wrote this, and Snake in the Grass, by the way, as I was commenting to Brian, is the first recorded use in print of that phrase in English, snake in the grass. So Quakers can be proud that we, inspired the use of that term. Or Satan transformed into an angel of light. And I'll just read the how they have these long subtitles.
And what year was this?
1696. Or Satan transformed into an angel of light, discovering the deep and unsuspected subtlety which is couched under the pretended simplicity of many of the principal leaders of those people called Quakers. And then he goes on, And one of his basic arguments is that Quakers are the gateway to atheism. Because of course they don't have a doctrine, and this is really bad. And so Charles Leslie was the name. Charles Leslie was interesting. I'll just real quickly. Now, I used to have the reference for this. If you look at his biography now, like in Wikipedia, where it doesn't say this, but I used to have the reference now that what really turned him against Quakers was because he was an Anglican clergyman who was, but he was very, had his own principles. And so when the Glorious Revolution happened in 1688 and William and Mary came and they deposed James, James II, who was Catholic, but who was the nominal head of the Anglican Church. This guy, Charles Wesley, thought that wasn't right. Shouldn't be just kicking out the head of your church, even if he's a Catholic. And so he refused to take an oath to William and Mary, so he lost all his cool benefits the clergyman got and stuff like that. Had to go into exile and live for a while in Rome at the invitation of the Pope, and he couldn't take it because he was surrounded by all these Catholics. So he ended up going back to England, where he died. And interesting guy. He was always getting in. But the story is, and I wish I could find the reference, I couldn't find it this time, was that the reason he got turned against Quakers was while he was on the lam from people persecuting him for not being an Orthodox Anglican or not towing the line, he was taken in by a Quaker family. And, his life might have been saved by them. But he was so appalled. He was so appalled that he got really down on Quakers. So, I'm just saying that I did not find the reference this time, and I tried to look it up online. So that might be just something I'm imagining. Who knows? But anyway, just so you know, there's a lot of interesting takes on Quakers, and Quakers were in a lot of trouble.
I was wondering if any of those old-time Quakers realized that what they did made change.
That's a really good question, because that's kind of what we've been talking about, and if you're just doing something because it's right to do, that's one thing. Without any expectation that it's going to have an effect.
Yeah.
I
noticed in my own life, I felt like I followed the Spirit's leading twice. And I have seen a little bit of change, but I don't know if it was for me or someone else.
At some point, Quakers, for a long time, have talked about their effect as a group. So now we're going to another level there. The effect that Quakers could have as a group on the rest of the world, like those Quakers in the in the UK back in the 17 and 1800s, were on that national committee. They clearly thought they were trying to get something to happen. In the 1600s, when Quakers first come out, they're more concerned about what we call civil liberties issues, and we're speaking as a body about them. A lot of it was just for self-preservation. They were very interested in freedom of religion and freedom of speech, but that was a strong leading. I want to move on to that communal part of Quakers making decisions, which ties back into business meeting. And in your books, it's I'll find the passage here, and someone can call out the page in the book where this is. It's where they talk about discernment, the discernment, and this gets into something that I don't know how long Quakers have been using this term.
It's bottom of 120.
He's kind of talking here. This is about page 120, you said, Brian?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure where we want to start. there's the end of a paragraph there. This is kind of a little bit after the part, the John Woolman quote. If we could start, we then understand that poverty cannot be overcome until we change the economic system. Does someone see that?
Where?
Oh, let me find out the exact navigation to that. I see, because it's on page 119 where that starts. The last word on page 119. If someone could someone start reading that and then go, maybe we'll split it up between a couple of people. But if you could start with that but on the bottom of 119 and then go on. Okay, thank you, Bethany.
We then understand that poverty cannot be overcome until we change the economic system. But how do you do that, and what alternative system would be realistically possible as well as actually desirable? Here the social scientists or economists is soon out of their depth, for these are questions about people and how they act and interact. So to answer these questions, moderns tend to resort to ideology, that is, to a system of ideas which explains the whole of human life in a way that protects what we take to be important and worthwhile in human life. More traditional people might turn to theology for their answers, that is, to a system of ideas based on the authority of a tradition or a sacred text. These ideas cannot be grounded in experience in the way science is because they are meant to provide the whole picture, which is beyond our experience. Going to the end of the paragraph.
Maybe skip down. Could someone skip down to the beginning of the next paragraph? This is not true. And thanks, Bethany. Someone else.
This is not true, however, and cannot be true of Quakers. They do not have the whole picture and cannot have it, precisely because their understanding is based on experience and committed to it. Like Paul the Apostle, they know in part and prophesy in part. Although they may see things as they are, beginning with how they themselves are, the things they see are limited to their particular situation. They need other people with different perspectives to see things more fully. Even then, they will not see the whole. They will see that part of the world that presents itself to them. But if they are thorough and patient enough in their discipline, they will see enough to know how they are to act and how to act effectively.
Just that next sentence.
The term normally used for this discipline is discernment. This conveys the idea that the understanding is reached by bringing many factors together.
And then there's a list of like 4 things.
What we know objectively about the facts of the situation, what we variously perceive the situation to be, what the people in the situation have to say about it, or otherwise expressed by their behavior, what we sense or feel is going on as we wait for the light, what we know from our experience of situations like this, some of which goes very deep into our life.
Thank you. So to me, I think we had it formulated in another way in an earlier chapter. That first the person gets a sense. Then maybe there's a leading, a concern, then a leading, then the leading gets tested through discernment with others, and this is another way of, I think, going at that. And I think, coupling that with what Mary talked about a couple of weeks ago about how business meeting works, this is what I think modern Quakers use the term. I don't think it's been used traditionally, but it's Quaker process. As much as there is, it's not a cut and dry thing. It's not a flow chart, although it has been put in flow charts. But Quaker process, when you'll hear that term used. And at the heart of Quaker process is discernment.
about this is it seems like there's a real commitment to trying not to oversimplify the world or to make things seem like they fit into a neat story that we have entirely within our heads and can act upon easily. I feel like there's sort of a deep humanism in that you want to actually understand and see fully the people involved in whatever it is that you're doing, and to not lose that understanding of them. And I feel like that's something that's so easy to do in a lot of ideological frameworks. Like definitely on the right, you have all this sort of xenophobia and racism and sort of jingoism that can sort of project that. You also have it on the left, definitely, if you see someone as part of the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat or the colonizer versus the colonized. It's very easy to sort of just put people into these sort of neat little story about the world and have a very consistent moral framework, but one that actually is pretty terrible in the end. I think that this is it's good to have a system and a process that really sort of systematically tries to work against those tendencies.
You know, these various layers that he talks about here are the various steps in the process, especially if it's something that the group has already, been at before, can get all compressed into a single instant. People are going to get tired of this because I think I've already mentioned this once about my first experience of business meeting. I don't know, I'll say it again. And it was, I've been coming to Quaker meeting now for, probably for several months. This was back in, I think, early '99. And someone, and I've been hearing, hey, a really good way to figure out how things really work with Quakers is just go to business meeting, And so finally, sometime about, I think it was July, I said, okay, I'll go to business meeting. And there were two items on the agenda. It was a short meeting. It looked like it was going to be a short meeting. And the first item was that there was going to be, that Henry Kissinger was going to come and make an appearance in a speech somewhere. And it was expected to be some opposition, and people would maybe be going to jail. And I think the idea was was the meeting going to contribute to a bail fund, to get people out of jail. Everybody just looked around and said, okay, we did it, that was it. It was very fast, and I thought that would be the controversial item. Okay, but no, because everyone had, we'd all been there, everyone else had all been there before, and they'd gone through this discernment. The next item, which I had thought would be the simple one, was, okay, remember this is July, it's Austin, it's an old house over on the west end of Austin, was whether to repair the air conditioner. The meeting was unable to come to unity at that time, and apparently this had been going on for quite a while. It kept coming up at business meetings. They still hadn't reached unity on the air conditioner. I think they finally did, and there were the reasons were ethical, about should we, well, anyway. Mary was probably around back then. You remember, and of course, Barbara.
I remember, should we have air conditioning?
Have air conditioning.
It's in Texas, yes.
Anyways, that's just a little idea of how discernment works, and how unity works, I guess, in meetings.
I love that story. I always worry, though, that the air conditioning part, as I understand it, it just resolved the attrition, that the people who didn't want the air conditioning eventually just aged out, or... Yeah. That's how...
Yeah.
I think that's a great example of Quaker.
It wasn't that we, the starry-eyed idealistic view is that we all labored together and somehow there was unity. We did, but there was unity because not everyone else. There was another, and maybe this has been mentioned, but back in the late 80s, early 90s, the meeting wanted to minute that we would, take under our care and perform, marriages of same-sex couples. Okay, and this was duly discerned somewhere in 91 or something like that. I wasn't here, but Mary or Barbara might remember. And so it took a while. So there was a couple who wanted to get married under the care of the meeting, and they were willing to wait until the meeting had discerned this, and the meeting did. But what happened was there were some old-time members of the meeting who hadn't come for years and heard that the decision was probably going to be made at a certain business meeting, so they showed up specifically to oppose it. And at that point, the person who was clerk, it was Paul. I believe it was it not Paul Stuckey? Was clerk at that?
That is before my time.
Yeah, Paul Stuckey, who's now is in Columbia. Some of you may have. Paul Stuckey was clerk, and as clerk, he said, "You weren't part of this decision. You weren't part of the discernment process. You cannot stand in the way of this decision. You're just not. You're just outside of this decision." So the meeting went through it.
I remember some people actually left the meeting because, do you remember what time that was? I left town in 78. But I remember asking Mother, why aren't these people showing up? She said, well, they couldn't deal with that, so they left the meeting. But that's just wrong.
And they weren't part of the decision process.
Yeah.
A lot of them. Any of them, because we had reached, the meeting had reached unity on it. Those who had come to business meeting. So I'm just saying this to kind of counteract the ideal that these things always are smooth and
There was a similar discussion over whether or not South Central Yearly Meeting would decide to minute the agreed marriage of people of the same sex. And I was present for that. That was late 90s. Yeah, I was after all.
decided to do it.
But it was before Bill and Warren got married because they waited to get the yearly meeting to decide.
Okay.
Do you know how hard it is being a German Quaker? Because Quakers take a long time to come to a decision to act. And Germans say, this needs doing now, get over here. That it's hard. I don't know how Mother did it.
Was like your father German and your mother a Quaker?
Both German, both Quaker.
Both German Quaker.
Mother, Daddy through the Depression, raised Baptist, but when he met Mother, she grew up under Hitler. Mm-hmm. So when she came over here, she was a mover and a shaker and a doer. Mm-hmm. And she and Daddy in 1950, after the Mandel Schweitzer, got married. Mm-hmm. And we're the early members of this meeting, and I grew up in it. But then I took a long sabbatical from 78 for a while under other people's influences. Never was happy. And then I said, that's ridiculous. I need to be here.
Yeah. Her mother was kind of our leading elder.
So I have people ask me, so I don't know Quakers, I don't know about them, so ask me questions. Whatever you want to know, just ask a question, whatever I can answer. One time I had a 12-year-old ask me if I eat babies, sacrifice babies.
Dear me, they were listening.
I had to clarify, no. But on the whole, people are not, most people don't want me to discuss because it's so different from what they're used to. And they just like, oh, she's so weird and different. Never mind, you know?
Yeah. At least my experience growing up in the Deep South and interacting with a lot of like very religious Southern Baptist types is that Quakers, they were very much, they're not Christians. They're heathens.
Whatever.
They're going to hell, kind of.
I grew up in Southern Baptist in Texas myself. And yet, our term for dress clothes was Sunday go to meeting clothes.
Yep.
And I've always wondered where that came
I
from.
pointed that too, yeah.
Yep. It is really hard with my ADD to stick with a book and finish it. But I found my niche, and I read them and then I bring them here. And they just need one more step to be processed when we get the right color tape. Anyway, these one set is trilogy and the others are different. But it is, and I can't remember the name, we can always go look, but they're female-based characters in Quaker families pre, during, and post-Civil War. And they deal with the Underground Railroad. They deal with the main character is the woman and her family and getting together with others, how they deal with the Underground Railroad and the others. And they do a lot of thought processing in how they behave in public and how they behave in private and in secret. And it captivates my attention the whole book. I can't wait for the next one to get. So the fiction shelf is increasing, but they're fabulous. And I think they would even interest teenagers, especially girls, because we need more females in our stories. But that really catches my attention. I read the whole thing. And it's really wonderful, and it teaches a lot because the three was mother, daughter, and the other daughter, and nurses in the Civil War. And there's a lot I didn't know that teaches based on historical information centered around Quakers. So I really like that.
I like on page 123 where they're talking about the night of darkness, and that it's
the bottom?
No, it's in the middle, or the part above it even, where they're talking about
The lust of the eye. And
pride. Darkness, the state of not being able to see.
I know I missed the business meeting chapter, so I'm behind on it, and I appreciate you guys' patience with me. But as far as discernment goes, and I had a little bit of a hard time. I didn't really even know what business meetings were until last week when I was like looking at them. I thought it was like I'm from a culture that's very traditional, kind of churchy. Going to handle like paying the bills and stuff, and then realize okay, this is the process. And then I had a little bit of a negative, because I think I kind of, have a unique perspective. What I like about Quakerism is it kind of says, hey, we all are experiencing this life and our spirituality in our own individual way that's based on our experience, and very much about like agreeing to disagree and having that as being a value. But I appreciated the way he explained it, and discernment in general. That it's and one of my resistances, I think, to some kind of organized religion, spirituality, is the conflict that can happen around stuff. And how that the business meeting is not so much about. It's about relationship. It's about not schisming around different issues and different opinions, and it's about finding ways to come together and relate to one another where we actually find we have more consensus than disagreement, and it just seemed like a beautiful thing. So that's what it's about.
Speaking to that idea, what I love about that process in business meeting is, on the one hand, it doesn't shy away from conflict and disagreement. Hopefully, that if there is a real difference, or someone really sees something and has their own perspective or their information, that they really should share that that's something that's important for them to give to the meeting. But then once you have shared, and this is very difficult, but I think it's a great practice, is once you've shared that truth, to sort of let it go, give it to the meeting, and then not be like, and that is my position, and I am going to stay there forever, and that is who I am. That's really not the idea, that you are giving it to the group, and that it's a valuable contribution, but that then you sort of trust the spirit and trust the group and trust that together you're going to try to arrive at a fuller truth of the matter.
So in the instance of in the 70s with the Friends who opposed conducting the gay marriage, I guess the clerk made the decision that they weren't following that practice, maybe, or maybe they didn't go to a threshing session or something like.
I believe there were people who had been away for a long time from the meeting. Possibly folks didn't even know they were there, the current attenders, and they just showed up.
Yeah, but if, let's say they had showed up a few weeks ahead of time and done a threshing session and actually tried to.
If they'd actually been part of the process, it would have been different.
It would have been different.
There were, excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was
There, okay.
there. There were a few people that wrote letters of their belief, and they were published in Friendly Notes. Otto Hoffman was one of those, and Eugene.
Ivash?
What?
Ivash?
Yes. No, it was, I don't know if it was Eugene or his wife.
Okay.
But I think both of those did, and maybe somebody else. But these were opposing. I don't think Otto opposed, but there was people were encouraged to do that, but it turned out that wasn't a good thing, because maybe it was, but it ended up calling people to the business meeting that hadn't attended in a long time.
I see.
And so some of those people did go away. The Iveshes were already involved in another religion. Not Tommy, not Tom. Tom wasn't involved in that, I don't think, but he was always with the movement. I don't remember what else that I should say about that. I clerked the clearness committee for Jim and Steve to be married.
The first couple that got
First couple.
Yeah.
And Paul Sticky was the clerk of the meeting at that time. And Paul really was incredibly good. He visited with everyone that had any kind of a take on this, and he went to the homes of everyone, one and two. And I'll just always admire him.
I'm sorry, Glenna. What did you say about Paul? I was a little.
I'm sorry. Okay, can you hear me now?
That's better.
Is that better? Okay. Paul visited everyone that was involved or had a known position about this, about same-gender marriage, and he visited with each person in their home and had, discussions with them and just listened. And that was amazingly effective. Okay.
I guess. Thanks, Glenna. Maybe we can. We're going to transition into worship now. So, if you want to return a borrowed book, that's fine. If you want to hang on to it, that's fine too, and bring it back to the library as led whenever you're led. So, thanks, folks.